Okay, in this part I'm going to show how I rig up what I'm calling a swim rig. So this is for baits where you're basically going to reel in the bait, and I'll be showing you some of the other rigs where we hop it along the bottom, or it's more of a bottom type of a presentation, but here we'll be swimming them. So let's start off with, let's see, I'll show you what we've got here. These are examples, some examples of the kind of plastic baits that I use regularly and have had really good success with them. There's some other ones in the box that are slight variations on this, but basically the same. So these right here, called little fishies, they're made by a company called Cream out of Tyler. And they're kind of unique in that they have these fins on the side here, so when you pull it along, it'll make the tail wiggle in a natural fashion. So that's a larger one, this is a smaller one. So let me show you how I rig those. This is all pretty simple stuff, but I'll just, the main thing to take note of are the jig heads. So what I've got is, I've got basically two different types of, they're kind of like fish heads. This particular one here has a little eye in it. It's a 16 ounce with a number 4 hook. This is a 1/32 ounce, I think it's still number 4, but it's a 1/32 an ounce. That's an extra one there. And then there's the round head jigs. This is a 16th ounce with a number 2 hook, a little bigger hook. And then this is a 1/32 ounce with, that looks like about the same, about a number 4 hook. Okay, for the little fishies, this is real simple. For the bigger one, we're going to use the 1/16 ounce. And the thing is, what you want to try to do is just start it in the middle, thread it in, and try to come up. You'll kind of learn how far to go up there with these. What you want to do is when you slide this up, it sits kind of like that. Okay. So this particular one here is for bigger fish, largemouth bass, maybe walleye, basically the bigger fish that are feeding on live bait or live forage. And then here's the littler one. Same thing, run it in, try to get it close to the middle as possible on the top, and slide it up. Okay, now this is a real good bait to start out with if you're in unfamiliar waters and you don't know if there are any fish in there, because you can catch bluegill, you can catch largemouth bass, you know, up to a pound or more on this one. So there's those two. Now these are made to be just reeled in. So you throw it out and you reel it in. I usually like to reel it in at a fairly slow pace. When the bait gets to the shore, reel it into the shore at a certain rate and look down and see if it's doing this. It's giving that wiggling action. And you want to probably go about as slow as you can to get that action. If you go too slow, it won't do anything. So there's those. Little fishies, really good baits. Caught a lot of fish on those. Okay, next let's go to the, this is I think called a baby shad. It's supposed to mimic a common forage for fish. And this particular color I like real well. I've had a lot of success with this color. It has kind of a silver belly and a dark top. There's some others in there that work well too. That'll have a fluorescent tail and so on. But this is basically the same. And here again, I'm going to use the little fish head type 1/32, run it in, and then slide it up. Now, one thing I might mention, sometimes as you're using these baits, over time it may kind of wear a little bit, and if you don't want to change out the bait altogether, say it slides down a bit like that, which it will do. One thing you can do is get some super glue when you make it up the first time, and just put a little super glue right in this area, slide it up on there, hold it for a couple seconds, and then that'll keep it in place. So that's true with any of these. This particular bait, I'll show this in the fishing video, techniques video, but this particular one, you see this tail here, how that wobbles? This particular one, the way I fish it is just to really slightly, the very tip of the rod, just jiggle it up and down, so as it goes along, it's giving this kind of action. I can't see it too well. Try it on the sideways. So it's doing that. Really good lure. In fact, this particular one is one, if I'm kind of looking where the fish might be, maybe it's unfamiliar waters, or there's several places where I normally fish, but they move around, I'll use this one right here to locate where the fish might be, because while this typically will catch your bluegill or your smaller largemouth bass, if you're moving around walking on the shore and casting this out and trying it, when you start catching some, that's a good sign that bigger fish are around too, because that means the bait fish are close by. So that's a really excellent, I really like that one a lot. Okay, and then these are little tube baits. These are small ones. They come in all kinds of sizes. Here I'll use the round head, 1/32. Same deal. Try to stick it in the middle, run it up a little bit, through, and then put a little super glue on here if you want to. Slide it on there. And these are really good for bluegill, panfish, that sort of thing. Sometimes I'll take scissors and cut this off a little bit, but I don't know why, but they really like these red and black tubes. The bluegill do. Lots of fun to catch. Okay, then the last one is this particular bait is made by a company called Z-Man, and they're unique in the plastic lures, like for these and plastic worms, in that their formula is buoyant. Not only that, it's tough as heck. You can see this thing just stretch out. It's really tough. It'll last for a long time. But the main thing is that it's buoyant. Whereas most of your worms or your plastic minnows are not, and so what happens is when you throw it, it just goes and sits on the bottom like this. But this particular one, let me show you how I do this. Now, there's a couple ways to do this. One is, like we did on the other ones, is you just take your hook and run it through and then push it up. The problem is, one disadvantage, you can do that. You can do that. One disadvantage of these is it's not stiff, and so it's kind of difficult to get this to thread on very well. So one of the things that I do is I will I'm just going to punch a little hole in here to get it started. That seems to help real well. So if you just get, I'm putting this little rod in there. It doesn't have to be real hot. Just heat it up a little bit and then try to run it right in the middle in a ways like that. Pull it out. This is 1/16 ounce jig head. I'm using that here. I'll show you another way that this is used in the next video. But so now that goes in real easy. Just run it up, feed it through, and then since there's a little hole, this is usually where it's hard to get it on. But since there's a little hole there, then you've got that. So this one, the nice thing about this particular bait is that you can use it either a swimming fashion like I showed before, just kind of jig it up and down. The tail will go like this, and it's buoyant, So it's going to kind of stay where it'll drop slowly if you stop reeling, but it won't just plummet to the bottom, which is nice because it gives the fish a chance to catch it when it's going down. Another thing you can do with this particular setup is similar to another rig I'll show you in a minute called Shaky Head or the Ned Rig. You can let it drop to the bottom, and since it's buoyant, it'll stick up like this. Whereas regular rubbers will just lay down on the bottom like this, but this one's buoyant, so it'll stick up like this, and then you can hop it along the bottom. And it kind of, I guess it kind of looks like a minnow or something feeding off the bottom. So that's, but here I'm talking about the swimming baits. So those are the basic ones that there's obviously there's tons of different rigs out there, and you can research those online on YouTube and stuff. But these are the ones that I use a lot and have had a lot of success with them. So typically when I go out, I'll start with this, see if I can find the fish, you know, catch a bluegill or a small bass or something like that, or use this one. Okay, here's one of the deals is that these swim baits are for swimming above the bottom. Now, depending on how deep it is, when you cast it out, you may want to let it sink a little bit. How much you want to sink, how deep it is. Okay, so I'll usually start out with these right here and then move up to these to get something bigger. Let's see. So I think that's it on the swim rig. This one I'm going to combine a couple of different rigs. One's called the Ned Rig and another's called the Shaky Head. They're pretty similar. But the Ned Rig is here again, we're using the Z-Man plastic, and this is called a TRD. It's a little stick bait. Stick baits come in different sizes. Here's one that's a big one, which I'll show how you can use this in another setup. But this one, this TRD, this is the, I guess, 2-inch. They come with a little bigger one too, but these don't look like much, but man, do they catch fish. They really do. They're very effective. So the way you do a Ned Rig is, here again, this is the Z-Man plastic, and this is the jig head, which is, this is 1/10 of an ounce. And it's got a pretty good size hook on it. I don't know what that is. Maybe it might be a 1 or 1/0. Anyway, and it has this it's kind of a flattened type of head on it. It has a little rounded. These also come in different shapes, but this is a pretty common one. So here again, with this plastic, I'm going to go ahead and pre-drill a little hole. You don't have to, but like I said before, I just think it makes it a little easier. And you put it in on the flat end of it. So we'll plunge this in a ways, like that, create a little hole. So we're talking about the flat end here, not this one. And then we just run the hook in, and then push it on up to the end. So you get this kind of look to it. Here again, doesn't look like much, but wow, these really catch fish. And the nice thing about this setup here is that it catches all kinds of fish. I've heard it's good for walleye as well as largemouth bass, who knows what. Okay, and the way this is fished, which I'll show in the other video, is you throw it out and you let it sink to the bottom. And since this is buoyant, it'll sit like this, like that. And usually what you do is just let it sit there for a little bit. So I think what happens, it sits on the bottom, it just kind of wiggles around a little bit with whatever current's there. And then there are different ways you can fish it after that. You can just, using your rod tip, just raise it up and then let it fall. What I like to do is basically just kind of hop it, let it sit, hop it, let it sit, and so on. So there's lots of variations on that as well. Now, so that's called the Ned Rig, and it's specifically for these kinds of baits. But you can use the same rig and the same type of presentation with either their Z-Man worm, this is the green pumpkin, and put it on here instead of the TRD. Usually what I like to do is just clip this off a little bit so it kind of fits the same size as the jig. And so in that case, it's sitting like this, hop it along. So that's a little different presentation. Or you can use the Finesse minnow that I showed earlier. In that one, I was using a round jig head. Here, this is a little heavier weight, so it'll fall a little faster. And so if you've got deeper water, you might want to go with this, but same thing here. Now these are not weedless, so that's one consideration. If you've got a lot of vegetation or algae on the bottom, this might not be the best choice. I'll show you one a little bit later called the Dropshot Rig that's better for that. But that's the Ned Rig. This particular setup is called the Neko Rig, and it's usually used with plastic worms. Here again, Z-Man worm. But you can also use it for the larger stick baits. And the way this one works, it's a little different presentation and gets a little more action than some of the other ones. Is what you do is you take your plastic worm. I like to cut a little bit off the tip here. It just makes it a little easier to do. And then you have a weight like this. I forget what we call this, and you insert it in the down here in the bottom, like that. So let me go ahead and do that. Oh, and this one, you don't really need to use the wire because you can heat this up. Now, this is lead, so you don't want to heat it up too much. You just want to get it warm enough so that it'll pierce the plastic. So we'll heat it up a little bit here. And then you just plunge it in, like so. Like so. Well, I kind of messed that one up a little bit. There we go. Okay. So it's like that. So we've got that done. Now, the next thing to do, and there's different, so what this is going to do is you're going to take your hook. This is a number 1. This is a special hook for the Ned rigs and the Dropshot rigs. What you're going to do is put this, stick this in here. Actually, that's not right. You're going to stick this, come up maybe about a couple inches, inch and a half, and put it in there so it sits like that in the water. Now, you can go ahead and put the hook in the worm itself, but a lot of people like to do this instead, is they'll use an O-ring. This kind of makes it a little easier to, or preserves the bait. This is a special tool for that. Just makes it easier to get the O-ring on. So you pop an O-ring on there. It's also nice because you can adjust it, put it wherever you want. So you've got the O-ring on there. And then your hook, I usually like to pierce a little bit of the plastic so it kind of stays put. So that's what you end up with, like that. And you want the barb to be up. And then you tie your line here. And the way this works is a little different from the shaky head in that with the Z-Man baits, it's sitting up like this. And then when you pull, so you jerk it a little bit, it really creates a lot of action because this will, so you're doing this and it's kind of walking along and this part's flapping around. So that's the Neko Rig. And you could do some variations on that. Like you could use this long stick bait if you wanted to, if you want a little bigger presentation. And this is also a really effective rig. And like all these, you know, every fishing situation is different. You know, it depends on what kind of fish are out there. And so what I will usually do is start out with a swim bait, unless I really know the water, where I'm fishing real well and what's out there. And then if I catch some smaller fish, then I'll switch to one of these other rigs, like the Ned Rig. This is good for larger fish. It doesn't look it, but you can catch big fish on this. This one or the next one that I'll show. But that's the Neko Rig. Okay, this one is the Dropshot Rig. It's got a little bit more to it, but it's not that hard to put together. One of the advantages of the Dropshot Rig is that it gets the bait, particularly with the Z-Man buoyant plastics, is it gets the bait off the bottom, and so you can fish it, you know, however much off the bottom you want. And so this is how you do this one. I usually get about a 3 or 4 foot length of the monofilament, and you can use either the line off your reel, or if you have some other line, it can even be a heavier line if you want. And then you take your hook. This is a number 1 split shot hook. And so you double up I don't know if you'll be able to see this very well, but you put the 2 ends together of the line, and then you thread both of them through the eye here, like that. I don't know if you can see this. There's YouTubes on how to do this as well, but you feed them both through, so like this. And then you run it on down. Leave a little room there's a loop down here at the end, like that. I don't know if you can see it or not. There's a loop here. So you leave a little room down there, and then all you do is you tie a knot, like that. Just take the loop and pull it through. So you have just a knot. Then you reach through the loop and grab the hook and pull it through. And I usually grab it right here, right about here at the head, and you'll see kind of a figure 8 there, and you just start pulling that up, pull it up, pull it up, and just pull it up and cinch it up. So you have this knot down here. All right. Then what you want to do is take the line on one end, find the end here, okay, and then you want to drop it through the top. So this is facing up like that, and you drop the line through the top. This is going to make sure that the hook gets aligned correctly. So you drop that through like that and pull it up. Okay? So then once you've got it where you can see you can see that the hook is pointing up in this direction. So then what you want to do is you want to put your weight down at the other direction. So now normally you can put this weight at different heights. I think most people recommend a foot or 8 inches or something like that to the weight. So you come down, that's maybe about a foot there, and then come down a little bit more. So you got room to tie your knot and cut that off. So now you want to attach your weight. These are drop shot weights. And this particular one is made for a thicker line where you just put your line in here and cinch it up. But I found with this light line that it'll tend to break. So I just take a flathead screwdriver and just open that up a little bit. So now I'm going to feed that through, and I'm going to do the improved clinch knot. And I've got a video that shows how to do this. This doesn't show up very well here, so the YouTube video shows how to do this. They use a big line so you can see, but the only difference in the way I do it and the way they suggest on the video is that, so you put it through here like that, and then you start looping it around. And they say to go around 5 times. But when I tried that with 5 times, I found I got, occasionally I get a little breakage, so I do it 7 times. Now I know you probably won't be able to see this, but I'm just going to go ahead and tie it. And then you run it through this, the loop down here at the bottom, and then back through this big loop that's there, and pull it. And then you just want to wet it a little bit. Makes it slide a little easier. And then you just pull it down. Sometimes I'll have to help it down a little bit if it kind of sticks, because you don't want to stress the knot too much. So you get that, and then you just clip off the excess. So there's our weight. See if you can. It's a little long to get on the whole camera, but let's see. So we've got our hook up above here, and then our weight down here, and that's a little more than 12 inches. But you can always redo it if you need to. So there's the weight end, and then at the other end, you want to put a swivel. And the reason why I like to use the swivel is this particular rig, as you're bringing it in, it tends to twist the line. But if you put a swivel up here at the top, then it won't twist the line, because the swivel will just turn. So here again, and you don't have to come up that far up above this one, and you can play around with the lengths and see what you like. Same kind of deal. We'll just run it through here, do an improved clinch knot. I'm just going to do a few here. Well, let's go ahead and do it, because this is going to be a usable rig. So let's get enough here to work with. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I found with 7 turns, I haven't any problems with it. So through there and up through here, a bit like that. Oops. It's learning how to tie these knots is a little bit difficult for me. You know, if you got thick fingers, so do that. Slide it down. I'm going to help it a little bit here. If it gets stuck and you don't help it a little bit, it tends to kind of mess up the line. Okay, cut that off. So we've got our, you want the hook to be facing up. Got a swivel up here at the top, hook, and the sinker. So when this is on the ground, let's pretend that the weight's down right down here. When you cast this in, the weight will sit on the bottom, and then that lifts, and then if you use the buoyant plastics, they sit above the top. And then of course, if you're fishing from the bank, it's kind of angled like that. But when you jump it along, and I'll show the different techniques, and it's basically the same as the other ones. You can kind of use your rod to bump it along the bottom, or you can lift it up and let it drop. You can swim it a little bit and then stop, but I'll show all that in the other video. So there's the Dropshot Rig. Now the baits that you can use on that are a lot. You can use a lot of them. Like you can use the Finesse minnows, like I showed earlier, but in this case, you just lip it. You just hook it through the lip, so that it's sitting like this. You don't go all the way in. You just hook it right through the lip or the end here, and so that'll be sitting like that, and then you can move it along. You can also use, I've got some of these are a little different minnow that are not made by Z-Man, so they're not buoyant, but they come in a little different configuration, so you can use those. I've had some luck with those as well, but just keep in mind these aren't going to float up, so that's a little different presentation. You can hook a plastic worm on there like this, just like you did the minnow, and that gives you a long worm on the end there. Of course, with the Z-Man, it'll float up and then wiggle along. Or you can do what's called a wacky rig. And what you do with a wacky rig, instead of hooking it here on the end, you hook it in the middle. I'm just barely going to do that one. And so what you get is, what the presentation is this folds back like that, and so when you jerk it, it really flops around. That's why they call it a wacky rig. Or you can use the larger stick baits. This is another popular rig for this one, where you just hook this in. Same thing. Wacky rig. So when you're pulling along, this kind of flops back and forth. So you get a lot of action with those. So that's the the Dropshot Rig. And so that's another one to try. You know, this is particularly good if you have a lot of vegetation, algae on the bottom, where those other setups will kind of get in the muck and get gummed up pretty good. Whereas this one, if you use the Z-Man baits, it will tend to stay above it, so you can adjust the length there to get above it. But this is another real popular rig. The pros use this a lot. So those are the rigs. Okay, so now I want to talk about a few other things that'll be in the kit. Let me mention this one first. I talked about this earlier, but when you're putting in these minnows or tubes or other baits, I mentioned that you can use some super glue. And so in the kit, there's this brush-on nail glue. So this one's made by Kiss. It's basically a brush-on super glue. So it has a little brush on it. I really like this because it's not messy at all. So when you're inserting this, like I showed you in the other one, you're coming through, and then when you get it up here, where you're ready to push it on, before you push it all the way up, just take your super glue brush and just brush some super glue on that part right there. so that when you push it on, it will stay up there. You know, even if you catch a fish on it, sometimes when you catch a fish on one of these, the bait will kind of pull down. Well, it won't if you have the super glue on there. It'll stay put, and that's true with all those, the tube bait and the little miniature shad, that sort of thing. So that's in the kit. In the kit is a hemostat, and I ground off the teeth here. Normally these lock up, but these are great because most of the time when you catch a fish, it'll get caught in their lip, and so it'll be pretty easy to get out. You can grab it with your fingers and get it loose. But occasionally they'll swallow it a little bit and it'll get down inside there, and you can't really get your fingers on it too well. So that's what these are for. You can reach in there. So what you do is you reach in, you grab the hook, and you can wiggle it free. So those are handy. These are little snippers for cutting your line, and I put a little clip on here, so you know, use these a lot. You know, when you're doing your setup and cutting lines, and so you can either keep them in your pocket or handy, but I also put a little clip on here so you can clip to your clothes. It has a retractable string here, so that's kind of handy. And let's see, the last thing is, this is a bait scent or attractant, fish attractant. This is one I like real well. It's called Mega Strike. And it comes with it's kind of a paste. It comes out. It has a little bit of a smell, but not too much. So what this is for is sometimes when you're fishing, and if you don't put some kind of attractant on here, this may taste like plastic to the fish once they get it in their mouth, and they'll spit it out before you set the hook. What this does is, if you know, just every now and then, it'll stay on quite a while. Just take some of this and rub it on. And there's all kinds of attractants, different ones. There's spray ones. This is one I like. Just smear it on there, and then when the fish gets it, it tastes like food, and they'll tend to hold on to it longer. And but you might want to take a little. I always take a little wet towel with me to wipe off my hands after I do that. So let's see if there's, I think that's everything.